Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And we're just going to start with this reminder from Todd Harrison. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this article from Marijuana Moment, just highlighting that in 3 weeks from yesterday, we will see the election, which will feature many cannabis initiatives on the ballot in many of these states. And so the most important ones that we're watching out for are Maryland and Missouri, which are states with larger populations, upwards of 6 million. And they're most likely going to vote yes. And so Maryland and Missouri alone would be 12 million more Americans that will be getting access to legal cannabis once a legal adult use market is launched. But on top of that, we've got Arkansas for medical as well, North Dakota and South Dakota for adult use, and then some smaller initiatives in Ohio, Texas, and Wisconsin, from my understanding, before the lame duck session. So more on this article below if you wanted to check out all the specifics that's going to be featured on every ballot. But just a reminder that we're getting close, as that will be in line with MSOs releasing their Q3 earnings as well. And so with that, just wanted to share the only update from the White House, essentially, or from Biden, as he tells young voters he's keeping his promise, or at least he's remembered the promise that he's yet to keep. And so he's trying to remind them that, oh, while it's been 18 months and I haven't kept any of my promises, I haven't forgotten that I've made the promise with you guys on cannabis in speech at pre-midterm rally, saying, I'm keeping my promise that no one should be in jail merely for using or possessing cannabis. But we also know, by doing a little bit of digging, that no one is really in jail at the federal level for simple possession of cannabis. And so again, lots more word salad to convince the easily deceived Democratic voter base, but that is where we're at least from the White House. But on top of that, at least we did get some news from the White House drug czar, commenting further on Biden's previous ask to start the descheduling process. And so with that, we got Marijuana Moment reporting. So at least this is big news as a change of tone coming from the drug czar. White House drug czar says cannabis clearly has medical value, which at this point is beyond obvious to anyone in their right mind who's not paid to believe the opposite or hold on to their past propagandist beliefs, because this just highlights how much of a farce it is that cannabis is still in the Schedule 1 classification, yet it's legal for medicinal use in over 40 plus states and almost legal for adult use in close to 20 as of right now. And so a few other things to highlight: the hypocrisy of the U.S. trying to play the moral high ground on Russia for locking up Brittany Griner when the U.S. has yet to reform their own laws, and they're doing the exact same thing that Russia's doing. Doesn't look good on you guys, and ultimately we want the U.S. to remain the world leader. At least as a Canadian, I want them to remain the world leader so that, you know, we can enjoy the standards of living that we've had. And while it doesn't seem like the Biden administration is for that, main thing on this rant to highlight is when you have discrepancies in your laws like this that make you look like a joke, the sooner you can fix them to not look like a joke so that people can take you seriously as the world leader again, the sooner things will get better, at least in my point of view. But rant over, I'll continue. And scheduling review must follow science. And while this is another bold statement, just based on what we've seen over the last few years, because if the government truly followed science, it would have been descheduled decades ago, and I'm referring to the cannabis plant. And so, fortunately, though, it seems like the White House is getting ready to change their narrative on science, or what their acceptable science is, and give up some control if it means tax revenue and jobs that are desperately needed in states that are lacking it because they've yet to reform their cannabis laws. And so anyways, rants over. Just wanted to share a bit of context to all of these announcements, but I'd say this is better than not. And so the White House drug czar says that it's key to ensure that any decision that's made as part the federal scientific review into cannabis' scheduling status directed by President Joe Biden filters into criminal justice as well. There, you just ruined all the progress you might have made. Just deschedule it and we'll all be happy. And when it comes to the science of cannabis, he said that there are clearly therapeutic benefits. Yeah, we don't need you to tell us this. We already know. So it's Rahul Gupta, director of the Office of National Drug Policy, talked about Biden's mass pardons of people who've committed federal cannabis possession offenses. Again, that's essentially no one, and his scheduling directive during an interview with NPR last week. And so I'm not going to get into this because it's, again, a lot of fluff. We don't know if this is actually going to mean anything or if it's just more pandering to their base before the election. But I'm going to leave the podcast down here if you wanted to tune in and grab the link. And so again, just rather hear this sentiment change coming from the White House and coming from the White House drug czar as opposed to not. But again, it doesn't mean a whole lot until we see some sort of action coming from the Dem administration as opposed to a lot of talk and broken promises that they consistently give. And so with that, just wanted to share this from Kyle Yeager, shared this on October 17th, so this would have been on Monday, highlighting that Senator Cory Booker says Congress has a good shot. So again, he's again, more fluff coming from Booker, changing his tone to sound more positive, but what does that really mean until we see some sort of an action? Nothing. At passing cannabis reform during the lame duck session. I wouldn't say it's a great shot, but it's on a good path. And while I've been very excited to share anything that Marijuana Moment publishes on Booker Talking, I'm getting less and less eager to do it because I realize it's more of just kind of sharing the Democratic fluff. And so with that, just wanted to share Nico Enia's sort of summary on someone in the cannabis industry, and his opinions are his own, but how he feels about Booker based on, again, the broken promises and the lack of action that we've actually seen from any Dems over the last year and a half. So while it's nice to hear this, again, we want action, and so just wanted to share Nico's views. Cory Booker is a hack who has done nothing but hurt social equity in cannabis, which has stalled all federal cannabis progress. Yes, Nico, I agree 100% just based on what I've observed over the last 18 months as well. He could have passed legislation long ago multiple times. That is a fact, as Schumer and as Wyden could have with him. U.S. cannabis policy illustrates everything wrong with politics and our government. Kind of sad to watch. And it is unfortunate because we did not anticipate that this would happen, when the Dems ended up flipping the Senate and when we thought this could have been a big, obviously, plus for the cannabis industry, which has not turned out to be. And so just wanted to share this context to remind you of Booker's true colors and that he has taught us very well. While talk is nice, it is cheap, and that we've got to focus on actions since he's lied to us for the last 18 months. And so with that, some positive news to help normalize the cannabis industry, this one coming out of Canada, but from Uber, which no doubt will want to apply what they're doing in Uber Canada to the US once they're allowed. Today, we're announcing a partnership with Leafly, which will enable local licensed cannabis retailers using their own CanSell certified staff to deliver to Torontonians 19+. And so I think it'll be a very interesting test nonetheless, and if Uber Eats has become successful enough by convincing people to trade some of their extra hard-earned dollars for convenience, no doubt they're going to have the same success selling cannabis. And hey, if they can help normalize the plant along the way before they bring it to other countries with larger populations, that is essentially what we want for the plant until we get it descheduled and get it back in the hands of the people. And so with that, interesting story from Todd Harrison sharing this one out of Bloomberg.com, but this was some news we're not expecting this morning, as weed is coming to Circle K gas stations in the US next year. Deal with Green Thumb Industries will begin with 10 stores in Florida, and this could help cannabis go more mainstream. As it appears, Green Thumb Industries, a US MSO, has inked a deal with the owner of Circle K gas stations, Alimentation Couche-Tard, which is actually based in Canada. And so take this part here with a grain of salt, but it sounds like it's more just Todd Harrison thinking out loud. TSX cometh. The owner of Circle K, Alimentation Couche-Tard, is listed on the TSX under ATD, and the TSX has never listed a U.S. plant touching security before until now. Think about that for a moment, please. But there is a little bit more information on this sales coverage from Circle K and GTI. Not exactly sure where the source is, probably Bloomberg, but I think the headline is misleading. Couche-Tard can't and won't be touching the plant. It's a lease deal. They will lease space near their convenience stores to Green Thumb. So Circle K won't be selling cannabis in any shape or form. In Canada, Couche-Tard has a franchise agreement and is actually operating the Circle K co-located fire and flower stores, and that's a different proposition, as companies in Canada, it's now federally legal, so they don't have the same issues that U.S. MSOs and plant-touching companies would have. But I think it shows the interest that Couche-Tard has in the space, especially in the U.S. opportunity. It's an opportunity for them to learn about the traffic these stores will attract, how profitable they are, and how they impact Circle K sales. And so a bit more on the story. If you wanted to read the original Bloomberg source, I will put that below. But just wanted to share this as an interesting development, especially in a more quiet quiet week of MSO news. And so with that, though, sharing this one from Todd Harrison out of California. This one comes from Beacon. Apparently, California, with a population of 39.5 million, the Attorney General announces plan to make illicit market crackdown a year-round effort. And why this wasn't in place many, many years ago when they first legalized, I don't know. It should have been all along. But Attorney General Bonta announced that the state will expand its multi-agency program to eliminate illicit plants, a year-round effort. According to the Associated Press, the expanded program will prosecute underlying labor crimes, environmental crimes, and the associated underground economy. It should just focus on the underground economy. He noted that it's the state's goal is the complete eradication of the illegal market, as AG Bonta, Democrat, is up for re-election this November. So no doubt, we kind of have a better understanding as to why he makes this announcement now. Why he hasn't been doing this all along is beyond us. And so that's just more of a highlighting how much of a shit show California is and how much more of it is for show versus actually helping the people on the ground and the residents that live there. And so just wanted to share this as a bit of context and a case study out of California itself. So thank you, Hirsch Jane, for sharing this. As in 2020, apparently Encinitas voters legalized cannabis sales by ballot over objections of a strongly prohibitionist city council. And 2 years later, the city is begrudgingly issuing the licenses, with stores hopefully expected to open in 2024. So not this year, not next year, year, but the year after, despite the fact that the citizens in Encinitas effectively voted to legalize cannabis in 2020. How pathetic. And it just begs the question, how can California continue to be such a shit show? And the answer that seems to hold true is bureaucracy and red tape, as it's another example of local control is deeply anti-democratic. Sounds like the local politicians seem to believe that they know better than the constituents that voted for their own representation, which is a classic mistake. And so hopefully, you get what you vote for, so hopefully the people wake up and vote them out. But essentially, also seeing stupidity, overplay common sense here, whereas if you don't open legal cannabis outlets, you're going to allow the illicit market to thrive, gain more power, possibly lead to more crime, as they do what they do, and there's no legal cannabis outlets to directly compete with the illicit market. And so it seems like Encinitas to hold cannabis business license lottery on October 21st, so 2 days from now, and only 4 winners will be chosen, while the city received 200 applications. Why not open 10, 20, 50 dispensaries to combat the illicit market, and then, actually allow those citizens in your constituency to become part of this industry, open businesses, get involved, and hopefully, gain some of the prosperity that this industry is eventually going to see when you get your head out of your asses, open legal outlets, and help fight the illicit black market. And so rant over with that one. Todd Harrison shares a poll found that Nebraska likely voters support legalizing medical cannabis. It seems 63% to 25%, and that again will be a question on the ballot in less than 3 weeks, and we will see Nebraska citizens likely vote to legalize medical cannabis. So another win for another state, as the November election will no doubt be another big blowout win for cannabis as it was 2 years ago. And so with that, sharing this one from thehill.com and their Changing America series, as cannabis use is becoming a new normal among young adults. Absolutely, as it becomes more accessible and more young adults realize that it's a much better substance for their own personal health and for their day-to-day life than some other ones. And so, not going to go through this whole thing, but I will leave the link available if you wanted to go through, but just highlighting some of the main points. More than 2/5 of young men and women now use cannabis, at least on occasion. But again, we didn't ask Americans these questions, 5-10 years ago. And so this is the first time we're actually really gathering this data. And so, of course, it seems like more people are coming towards cannabis. And as they are, especially as we have legal access. With young women are a big part of the growth as a gender gap on the use of cannabis closes, and then across the entire population, cannabis use may have hit an all-time high. But again, this is only because you're actually asking people if they're consuming cannabis now, whereas before you likely never did that. And so more to it, obviously, if you wanted to grab the link below, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, as I've covered a lot of different studies that highlight data like this over time, but link is below from thehill.com if you wanted to check it out. And so with that, on to snippets from investment firms, so take these with a grain of salt, but let's run through them so that you can hopefully gather some insights to make up for the fact that it was a lighter news week in the world of cannabis. And so with that, briefly on potential M&A targets, we rank the potential targets for the larger MSOs based on footprint attractiveness and antitrust friendliness. And so these are all tier 2 MSOs that could continue chugging along, but the longer that SAFE takes, the more uncertain of a position or situation that it will put them in, therefore making them attractive M&A targets. And so we got Jushi, Ascend Wellness, Air Wellness, TerraSend, Forefront Ventures, and Goodness Growth. And so you can pause to read a little bit more about the footprints that they own and what might make them attractive M&A targets in the future. And so with that, we've got this one from Roth on U.S. cannabis. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. Weekly rehash cannabis equity returns in a historical context. And so you can pause to read the whole thing. But just to summarize, we believe the setup is coming, as our thesis of tightened capital, limited capital raises over the last year will lead to a favorable supply-demand dynamic once again, with fewer U.S. leaders to be the benefactors, and SAFE Plus progress will bring flow. And that is if SAFE Plus does end up passing. Seems like they're a bit more bullish, much like some of the other investment firms are becoming as time goes on, and as we hear this incremental sentiment shift from Booker and others, but we still don't know. Stage is set, so plan accordingly for your own situation, though. And so with that, Jesse Redmond sharing Cowen's U.S. cannabis third quarter 2022 preview. Falling prices, rising inflation, and weaker consumer demand continue to present challenges. Expect a flat Q3 for most, maybe better for those with New Jersey assets. And obviously, the more legal outlets New Jersey would have, the more sales New Jersey could bring in for these MSOs. But we'll get to that point, as New Jersey is no doubt going to loosen their tight regulatory stranglehold that they have. But with Cowen Insight, a bit of a summary up here, and some more sequential trends in third quarter remain soft, and I just dislike how they focus so much on quarter-over-quarter growth, when, if you just zoom out and look at the year-over-year progress, and then states that are going to organically reform their laws, this opportunity to me seems like a no-brainer, but that's just my opinion. But for traders and active investors with a more short-term mindset that care about the quarter-over-quarter changes, you might be able to find something interesting in here for you, while wholesale price deflation continues to weigh on growth. And while this does suck, it is another factor of California not combating the illicit market as effectively as they could, while states like New Jersey waited a year and a half to launch, where they could have launched a lot sooner, much like Arizona that launched after 2 months, and are already reaping in the benefits of legal cannabis taxes, jobs, and all that. And so lots in here to take, but this is just, again, Cowen's point of view on the third quarter 2022 preview. And with that, wanted to share what Dennis Rudiff has to say, a U.S. cannabis sector update, Q3 2022 preview, moderating estimates lower by Haywood. And so there's a little bit more on here that I wanted to share. We are pessimistic, but the sector is great. And although year-over-year sales have been decreasing over the last 12 months, fundamentals are good, etc., everyone understands the obvious. In fact, it is binary, with or without SAFE, with or without Fed legalization, rescheduling, descheduling. It's the same state-led growth story, and these are real companies expanding while it's cheap on the ground and doing all the right things that they need to do. And so more in here, just to highlight that on average, the annual year-over-year growth remains encouraging and supportive of our fundamental outlook. Again, when you can zoom out and focus on year-over-year as opposed to the quarter-over-quarter. But with that, this is what Haywood has to say. And so Q3 2022 preview, moderating estimates lower, looking at year-to-date overview, upcoming earnings and estimate revisions, looking into Q4 and beyond, and then target price revisions, current and then previous ones that they've had. And so you can pause to read for more info, or you can grab the link below. And this is, again, what Haywood has to say. And the latest at the federal level, just a summary of some of the news that we got last week. November 2022 ballot initiatives to watch. More information there, but it might be tough to read, so you might have to grab the link below if you wanted to go through this all. But it is all there with Q3 preview and current valuation analysis. And so I got a nice breakdown of all the MSOs, their revenue, adjusted EBITDA, and some certain figures here if you wanted to track. So valuation scatter plot, and the source comes from Capital IQ and Haywood Securities. So pause to read, or you can grab the link below if you wanted to go through it. It seems there's one more, actually. Figure 10 US MSO valuations versus growth analysis. Looking at enterprise value divided by revenue numbers, 2023 estimates, and then enterprise value divided by EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, looking at 2023 estimates as well, while their multiple history. And again, these companies were valued at this point when they were making half the revenue, had half of the dispensaries that they have now. And while the share prices have only fallen since then, mainly because the Dems have not kept their campaign promises, and Wall Street knew better than we did not to trust any politicians, because now looking at the details, we can see that they work for Big Pharma and not for the will of the American people based on campaign contributions. The fact is that MSOs have only gotten fundamentally stronger and essentially doubled their revenue since that point in time, and now we're seeing record-breaking volume come back in because of the recent announcement from the White House. And so again, that is where we sit. Obviously, we can't necessarily change what we've gone through. All we can do is plan accordingly for our own situation now and what we think is going to come in the future. And so this is, again, Haywood on U.S. Cannabis. Well, we've got this one, weekly update by Echelon. So thank you, Dennis Rudiff, for sharing this again so I can make it available to you. And so cannabis market highlights. This one seems to be on the news of the termination of Verano's acquisition of Goodness Growth. Shakes up the industry M&A landscape as cannabis shares give back much of the gains from the post-Biden announcement. While this one's looking at cannabis markets and movers this last week. And so again, source is S&P Capital IQ pricing from Echelon Capital Markets. So it seems like Echelon and Haywood both get their source from Capital IQ or whoever. And so interesting that it's coming from the same source, and we're just getting the different interpretations. But regardless, again, take these all with a grain of salt. And so with that, on to this next one, U.S. developments. More on the news of Verano Holding and Goodness Growth terminating their agreement. TerraSun Corp raising debt at a high interest rate of 12.75% or 13% effectively. Not ideal to see those high numbers coming back. While Air Wellness appoints new president, announces resignation of co-COO. And so more information if you wanted to pause to read these new stories. While Charlotte's Web Holdings announces exclusive multi-year partnership with Major League Baseball. Again, a story I covered last week. A bit more on it, though. While Illinois September cannabis sales roughly flat month over month, increases 0.6% quarter over quarter. While Kansas Special Committee on Medical Cannabis holds first of 3 meetings discussing medical cannabis legalization. So a bit more if you wanted to pause to read all of these stories if you haven't caught up on the last few weeks' videos. And with that, Cannabis Weekly by Echelon, latest comps and consensus estimates. And so wanted to share this up-to-date comp sheet from, I believe it is Echelon. Yes, Echelon. And so comparable companies, consensus estimates. It's going to be difficult to read, so I recommend you grab the link below, but it has all of the large cap cannabis companies, large cap US companies, Canadian cannabis retailers, small mid-cap Canadian growers, and small mid-cap US companies, looking at their 2022 revenue, 2023 estimated revenue, 2022 EBITDA numbers, and then their estimated 2023 earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization numbers as well. And so we've got this last one from Echelon as it highlights the latest cannabis valuation ratios based on consensus estimates and broker ratings. And so thanks, Dennis, again for sharing this one from Echelon. And so the source is company filings from the MSOs, Echelon Capital Markets, S&P Capital IQ. So again, one of the sources that they all seem to use that I just mentioned. And then there's a bit more information down here, but it essentially highlights U.S. comparable companies' valuation ratios based on consensus estimates. And so while I try to go through this, it's not very clear, so you'll likely have to grab the link below and pull this up yourself. But lots to go through here if you want to take the time and try to understand what all of these is explaining to you. And so with that, it looks at individual companies as well. So Green Thumb Industries, Fire and Flower Holdings, Air Wellness, Ianthus Capital Holdings, True Leaf Cannabis Corp, High Tide, so it does include some random Canadian retailers, Verano Holdings Corp, Vext Science, TerraSend Corp, Maramed, Ascend Wellness Holdings, Indiva Limited, and Jushi Holdings. And why it doesn't seem to have Cureleaf or Cresco Labs or some other MSOs, I'm not exactly sure, but just sharing this if you wanted to look into it and found it interesting. And so on to some other news. We got this one, a study out of the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology highlighting medical cannabis use patterns and adverse effects in inflammatory bowel disease. And so we saw the goal of the study to investigate medical cannabis use patterns and adverse effects in patients with inflammatory bowel disease. Background, medical cannabis is now legal in many states. Although previous studies suggest improvements in disease activity among IBD patients using medical cannabis, use patterns and adverse effects are unclear. Why we need more studies and why descheduling cannabis would be the best thing for everybody so that we could, find these medical benefits sooner than later. But I'll let you read through the study and results if you're interested. But just to highlight the conclusions, medical cannabis users with IBD perceive symptom benefits and report decreased emergency room visits without serious adverse effects, which sounds like a net positive. And so good to share this. Further studies are needed, though, of course, to confirm these results with objective measures of healthcare utilization and disease activity. So hopefully we can see cannabis descheduled sooner than later so that we can take this a lot more seriously and start rescheduling for the medical benefits that we should have been doing a long time ago. Or not rescheduling, but studying for the medical benefits. And so with that, on to some Canada news. As Matt Lemaire, one of the writers formerly for MJ Biz Daily, highlights a bit of a summary for the Canadian cannabis industry exclusive. 2/3 of Canadian cannabis producers couldn't pay their tax bills on time as of September, and outstanding excise debt soared to $97.5 million, already doubles last year's total. And so, interesting story here from MJ Biz Daily, highlighting all of the details if you wanted to go through it, but just wanted to share this summary from Matt Lemaire with comments from D. Sutton, Pete Colleen in Cannabis Canada, and Tony Georgie. So I imagine people involved in the industry that they thought were useful in referencing, and a bit more on those people down here. He does beg the very relevant question. Most Canadian cannabis producers can't pay their excise bills on time, according to data acquired by MJ Biz Daily. Should the tax be amended? I'd say yes, because when you launch a new industry, a lot of the taxes are implied based on what they think could happen, not what actually does happen. And when things are different based on how things were rolled out, and we see in Canada, we have like a government monopoly on the distribution, and that's likely why a lot of these companies aren't making as much as they could be making. At this point in time, it's like, yes, that is why we should amend the tax, because things haven't gone as we planned. They've gone how the industry has gone, and now we adapt. And especially at this point in time when Canada, much like the US, is printing dollars out of their ass, and we know that they can print dollars, why are we even paying taxes right now? That's another thing that grinds my gears that I could get into. But I digress. Out of 259 Canadian cannabis producers required to remit excise duty on the federal government in September, only approximately 87 could do so, according to data acquired by MJ Biz Daily. Overdue excise duties are the canary in the coal mine, highlighting of how much of a failure the cannabis industry in Canada is. And again, it's just how it was done, especially with a lot of government regulation that didn't necessarily have to be there. And so a bit more information in this little snippet here, but something interesting I learned: Canada's federal government expects cannabis producers to pay excise tax within 30 days of a sale. But the biggest buyer of Canada, the Ontario Cannabis Store, pays LPs 60 days after wholesale transactions. And so it's another prime example of governments and shitty technicalities getting in the way of allowing industry players to compete and help bring the industry out of the dumps over time organically. And while that's easier said than done, how can you expect LPs to pay an excise tax within 30 days when you can wait 60 days to pay after a wholesale transaction? So it's just stupidity. Seems like there's an easy fix to this. Yes, loosen regulations around these technicalities, but also give these companies a 1 to 3 year break to stop paying this excise tax, which they don't need to pay because you can just print money out of your ass, effectively taxing everyone that uses your currency, which is bullshit. Rant over. But that is how the cannabis industry in Canada is surviving. On to Germany, our favorite source out of Germany, Alfredo Pasquale. So thank you, Alfredo, for sharing this. Good morning from Germany, where the RND DE just published a story about the German key points paper that should serve as the base for the future cannabis legalization bill. So again, serving as a base. There's a lot more in here if you wanted to grab the link below and read through, but I essentially pulled up the article here and had translated it. So details on cannabis legalization, Lauterbach plans with these key points. And so I'm just glad to say that I live in Canada and we don't have to follow these sort of restrictions, but regardless, it is still a step in the right direction, as people aren't going to look at the details. They're just going to hear, wow, Germany's legalizing. So in Germany, the purchase and
possession of 20 grams of cannabis from the age of 18 will be generally exempt from punishment. This emerges from the key points of Health Minister Karl Lauterbach for the planned cannabis legalization, which are available to the editorial network Germany R&D as of Wednesday. They are currently being coordinated between the ministries involved, and so get this. According to this, the self-cultivation is up to 2 cannabis plants will also be allowed. The amount of the intoxicating active ingredient THC in legalized cannabis should be a maximum of 15%. What? Are you joking me? In order to prevent cannabis-related brain damage, something that they just made up because we don't have the science to back this up. That's a fact. However, only products with THC content of no more than 10% may be sold to adolescents between 18 and 21 years of age. And it's like they say all this without acknowledging the fact we have an endocannabinoid system in our body. So this brain-related cannabis damage is, again, well, maybe we should study the endocannabinoid system and how THC affects that before making any outrageous claims like that. But I digress. The possession limit of 20 grams of cannabis should apply regardless of the origin of the cannabis product and the THC content. So 20 grams is the limit, whereas even in Canada, we can buy an ounce. So in Canada, it's even better than this. In principle, cannabis should no longer be legally classified as a narcotic. And so a lot of unfortunate developments in here, especially trying to keep THC down to 15%. But again, it's just a start. This is not going to be the final bill. So a bit more advertising ban despite cannabis legalization. So more information on what they're planning here if you wanted to pause to read. And the last bit, pharmacies should be allowed to sell cannabis, no doubt. And so more information on that. So lastly, just wanted to share this information, same information coming from another source in the US, MSN.com. Essentially not getting into the details, but this is essentially all they're saying. Germany finalizes its law to legalize the possession and sale of cannabis, because obviously that sounds a lot better than the technicalities that any cannabis consumer would say, like, oh, that actually sucks compared to where I live. So fortunate to be where I am. But Germany finalizes its law to legalize the possession and sales of cannabis. The government estimates that some 4 million adults consume cannabis in Germany, and according to Lauterbach, its moderate and safe use is part of a modern society, according to them. But just happy to share that Germany is taking steps in the right direction. And it, again, would be huge if we get an announcement that Germany has the legislation ready to legalize by the end of this year in line with an election in November. That would be huge. And then as well, while we won't see that happen anytime soon because Germany has to then pass that legislation in 2023 before making it applicable and launching in 2024. Again, it's a long process, but this could be matched with a big cannabis win in November to hopefully help us get that boost that we've needed, as the stage has been set for a while, and it's still a when not if scenario, at least in my mind. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.